Welcome, YouTube friends and family, to today's edition of the Wellness Homesteader. So, change of scenery today. We are actually up in my sewing/craft room. No judgment, please. So, while a lot of things have stayed very clean, with the gracious plenty inheritance of a lot of craft and sewing items that I received when my mom passed away, it needs a good clean out again, but we're not going to do that today. So January can be an interesting month for me. Here in Ohio, it is our coldest month of the year. It is the month where we generally, but not always, get the most snow. So you'll be seeing this on Thursday, and today is Tuesday. So for those of us from the Ohio Valley up through the New England states, keep an eye on that weather, guys, because we might have our first major snowmaker. So it's always good to have some in-home projects to do in the winter when my animal care is really the only outdoor activity that I have. And I'm not, working on food preservation and gardening, although I'm going to do some garden planting still in the month of January. So I thought, it's been a while since we've done a story time. So I thought we would do a story time. So what are we going to talk about today? We are going to be talking about the history of home sewing, and I am going to share with you my vintage sewing pattern collection. I hope you'll stay tuned. So I thought we would start out by talking about just the history of sewing patterns. So in today's world, let me find a modern pattern. We're accustomed to seeing patterns in envelopes with color illustrations or actual pictures. All the sizing is on the back. There are multiple sizes available in one envelope. That's kind of traditionally what I, from the time I started sewing, remember. So I started sewing, let me do some quick math, when I was 12, which would have been 1973. So back in that era, we were still required to take home ec, and I absolutely love sewing, and I've shared this with you all before. I'm currently the proud owner of 2 sewing machines. The one right here is my fancy schmancy. It is a Husqvarna Viking Designer Epic 2. I always have to look. And I've had this a couple years. It was quite a treat to me. Well, I think I might have gotten it during COVID. So, or the V, it's been a few years. And then back here, you will see I have another early model Husqvarna. And that is just my favorite type of sewing machine. I think this will make my 4th because often you can trade in. I had gifted this one to my mother, so I'd have inherited it back. See what I mean, guys? See why I need to declutter this whole house. And the angle I have you at the craft room doesn't look bad. A lot of things have stayed perfectly organized and were good solutions. A few things haven't, but that's for another day, right? Let's talk about something fun. So what is the history of sewing patterns? And I started thinking about it and thought, wow, when did people start home sewing? It was published in the earliest times in books, trade magazines, journals, and other periodicals, i.e., regularly released things like magazines. So guys, I have talking notes, so I am going to be referring. What was in those magazines? And if y'all remember, do you remember if you've ever seen the vintage Great Big like Life and Look magazines, they were huge. And they had full-size pull-out pattern sheets that were suitable to be traced, and they were included in women's periodicals. Okay, you ready for this? Because I was like, maybe like early 1900s, no, 1770. Like, who knew that? And for my friends across the pond, y'all were way ahead of us in the U.S. So in 1808, the Lady Economy Assistant, published in England, provided full-size traceable patterns. So even though it started in 1770, this particular magazine started producing regularly. Some were for home sewing, but a lot of the early patterns were for professional tailors. So guys, I always thought, you know, like fashion designers, they just made them up, but they could also purchase patterns if they were a professional seamstress / tailor. In 1848, Gentleman's Magazine of Fashion started including men's full-size patterns. Now, I don't know if any of you all have ever sewn for a man. Y'all, it is a whole different world. First of all, things overlap oppositely, not separately, oppositely. And if you're making anything like lined, it just seems like they always had a million pieces. And I used to sew, you know, back in the 80s, for my son's father and myself and my son, matching things, right? I apologize, guys. I'm doing an update on the Designer Epic 2, and that just really highlights how much things have changed from the old treadle sewing machines, right? And if you see some flashing, it's going to download some new software and it's going to automatically restart. So it may all of a sudden make a bunch of noise. Just pretend it's not. So from the 1830s on, shops in England, thank you friends across the pond, started advertising paper sewing patterns for sale. So it wasn't just, you know, the pull-out feature in a periodical. They actually had like physical paper patterns, but not in the envelope style we're accustomed to today. In 1853, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, it's either Godey's or Godey's, Godeys, Ladies' Book, had patterns in every book and expanded from there. It just really started to boom because not only did professional seamstresses and tailors need those patterns, so did the home sewer. By the 20th century, so the 1900s, patterns were available in magazines, catalogs, and physically in shops. So how many of you remember, I used to love doing this, going to the fabric store back in the OG, right? And they have these big, thick, gigantic books and you could flip through. And then they have file cabinets, and they still do today, where you would say it's, you know, pattern number 1830, you would go to the drawer that held 1830 and pull it out and see if they had your size. So there are several different pattern companies, and we will get to what I have. Y'all, I'm gonna hiccup, I'm sorry. That one hurt. You guys are probably like, do something about your hiccups. But if you watch my last video, hopefully they'll be disappearing shortly. So the first major manufacturer, and this was shocking to me, to offer tissue paper patterns, not patterns that you had to trace off onto something else, was Butterick. And that was founded by Ebenezer Butterick, not to be confused with Ebenezer Scrooge. But they offered patterns in graduated sizes. So it wasn't just a one size fits most, you as the seamstress had to up it or smaller it. That's not proper English, but you know, enlarge it or reduce it. The company was launched in 1863, but this is also really interesting. At first, what they had was heavy cardboard patterns or templates. And I know I say the word pattern wrong. It's not a pattern. Okay, little country slipping out. But it was for children's clothing. And I thought, you know, that kind of makes sense because back in that time frame, there were a lot larger of families, and you know, you could sew more economically at home, and there wasn't ready-made fashion as available. So the kids' clothes were probably a huge need and may have well been worn out. And hand-me-downs not so common, as number one, they had large families, and number two, they didn't have the diversity in their wardrobe, so they got washed and reworn a lot. Their innovation at Butterick was the standard graded sizes. So instead of the one size fits most, they started having, I'll just say ladies sizes, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, etc. At first, this cracks me up. His family would actually cut and fold all of those patterns. And you know how fragile tissue paper patterns are. And they actually sold them from their home. And that is what built their business. In 1866, they added women's patterns and then later men's. So children's, women's, men's. In 1873, they started publishing a magazine called The Delineator to actually publish and advertise their patterns. In the early 1900s, they started putting their patterns in, it's hard not to say patterns in envelopes like we're accustomed to today. And if you all have ever wondered, and I am not an expert, but if you've ever wondered how old a pattern is, we'll talk about that a little bit. Early patterns did not have the markings. So for seam allowances, darts, trying to think, plackets, ruffles, none of that was printed on the pattern. Many times it was a separate sheet of, it wasn't a separate sheet of paper like we're accustomed to today. It was simply a piece of paper printed and stuck onto the actual pattern that had the instructions. Can you imagine having to keep all those big tissue paper patterns out to complete a project? Now, I do want to share a little something. My grandmother, Victoria, was born in 1898. She is truly the best seamstress I can ever recall. She could look at an outfit and go to the sewing machine, go to her fabric, cut it out, and sew it. So even though my mom grew up in poverty, both of my parents did in Appalachia, my grandma had a treadle sewing machine, and my mom could say, I want a dress with a poofy skirt and a high collar and short sleeves, and my grandma could create it. Or when they had access to any kind of catalog, she could look at the picture and create it. I have never had that degree of sewing skills. Let me just say that. All right, so that's Butterick. I did not know that they were truly the oldest company. Now we're going to move on to other pattern companies, not necessarily in the order in which they were founded or released. So number 2, I'm sure you've all heard of McCall's. So McCall's was founded by James McCall. Where's Clark's patterns? I'm sorry, in 1870 in New York City. And their patterns were not printed on until 1919, but they did start in 1920 to put the full color illustrations on the front. So at first you will notice as we look at my vintage patterns, they were all just drawings, and they were colorized too as well, because I don't have any pre-1920s patterns, period. Excuse me. One unique thing about McCall's is they consistently printed, and guys, you can find it in all kinds of places. This one doesn't even have a date. So sometimes it's on the envelope lid. Sometimes you have to lift the lid. It's here. Sometimes it's on the bottom flap that they fold up to make the envelope. And sometimes it's in the printed instructions. But McCall's consistently printed dates. So that is the easiest vintage pattern to date pre-1950. Pretty much 50s and beyond. Not always, because guys, this is a 1950s pattern, I'm sure, because this was my aunt's. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. They would have dates, but not always. All right, now, the tried and true. Simplicity. I always thought that Simplicity would have been like the very first pattern company, because honestly, y'all, that's what I sewed with the most. Their goal was to make an easier to use and lowered price pattern. So they came, their entry into the market was, we're easy and we're cheap. Okay, that just sounded bad and I didn't mean it that way. We're less expensive than all these other companies that have been around longer. But better than that, you're going to be successful with whatever you try to make. They were truly one of the fastest growing companies, and they are today sold in more than 60 countries, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. They printed for the drugstore chain Woolworths. They exclusively printed the Dewberry patterns from 1931 to 1946. Sorry, y'all. It's just my sewing machine doing its thing. So when I think about patterns, those are kind of my top 3 of what I'm accustomed to, but there's a couple more, and let's talk about them. Okay, next, Vogue. So Vogue was actually started as a pattern service. So if a tailor or a seamstress said, I want to produce a new spring line, I want it to be, a pencil shape, I want all the women's dresses to have matching jackets. This was 1899. That's what they did. They also had Vogue magazine, and their claim to fame, I think, was more high fashion than, affordability or ease of making. But it was a spin-off. The actual Vogue Pattern Company was a spin-off of their magazine weekly pattern feature. The Pattern Company was actually formed not until 1914, so 15 years later they went from a service to actually a company and started selling in department stores. Now this is something I didn't know, y'all, and I'm curious. Drop me a comment. Did you know that in 1961, which was a very good year, the year I was born, Vogue actually sold to Butterick, but Butterick bought the rights, so to speak, to market under the Vogue name. So a little history about Vogue patterns. When we would go to the fabric store and start looking through the pattern books, my mom never wanted me, my sister didn't sew, to pick any Vogue patterns, both for her to sew or for myself to sew, because, and this is just my experience, they were complicated, they had loads more pieces, and their instructions were quite confusing. So I don't have a lot of experience. I have certainly sewn Vogue patterns, and in fact have a few Vogue vintage patterns, but I had no idea that I thought they were a whole separate company, but they were actually parent owned by Butterick. So there were a lot of subsequent companies. So this is Women's Day Advance. That wasn't one that I did any research on. Kind of forgot I had this one. There was the Hollywood Pattern Company, and they would say, dress like the stars, and they would often copy popular gowns and styles of current movie stars. There was the New York Pattern Company. Oh, I'm sorry, the Advance Pattern Company. And I don't know what year these were actually formed. I didn't go that deep because I won't bore you to death. I like history. Don't know if everybody else does. But I started thinking, today, if you want a pattern, it's really easy to go online to somebody's Etsy store, hit buy, they'll send you the PDF, you download it, you tape it together. I've actually have videos where I've made circle skirts, things like that. Some are free, some are purchased, but the downloadable patterns really didn't start until about 2004. So when you look back over the history of patterns, we started out with cardboard, we started out with them as a magazine insert, and we progressed from just dressmakers and tailors to really having access to this being something that the home sewer could do. So then I started thinking, well, why is sewing not so popular? I have people ask me all the time, do you sew? Swillen, if you're watching this is not a dig at you. Because it used to be if you needed a seam repaired or a zipper restitched or whatsoever, you took it to the dry cleaners. Y'all looked around to find any dry cleaners lately? Not a popular service. So seamstresses are very difficult to find. So I'm always happy to do little repairs and seams and things like that for people. I, in fact, enjoy it. I consider it, you know, part of my love language is doing for others and feeding people. So I'm always happy to do it. But I do get like asked a lot. And oh, my son's gonna kill me for telling this. One of the things he would like to learn to do is just some basic sewing so that he doesn't have to wait until he's coming home to bring everything that might need mended, because there aren't really seamstresses on every single corner. So let's talk a little bit about what has happened with the home sewing. I don't want to call it an industry, the home sewing fad in general. I tried to catch it. I could see out of the corner of my eye this whole thing was about to reset, and it can be pretty loud. So I didn't want it to disrupt the video. Not sure if the video caught it or if I caught it in time. So back to home sewing. So home sewing actually peaked in the 1950s. And I'm like, wait, what? You know, I learned to sew in the 70s, and home sewing among my socioeconomic group was extraordinarily popular. So what changed? Well, actually it started to decline in the 70s because more women were joining the workforce. And a lot of the home sewing was done for women, you know, for themselves, maybe their children too, but, you know, home deck projects, curtains, you know, useful things around the house. And it just was viewed as being uneconomical, if you think time is money, to do all of your home sewing when mass-produced goods started to be more readily available. By 1985, and I can attest to this, the cost of home sewing was greater than purchasing a ready-made garment. And guys, this is super true today. Let me tell you, if you think, well, I shouldn't say you can't save money by home sewing, because you can, and you're gonna end up with a much better made garment than a lot of the fast fashion imported things. But think about, I'll try to pick up like Joann fabric, okay? That's pretty, I think, universal across the US. Even things like Michael, Michael still has an Hobby Lobby. They all have fabric departments. But if you look at those, they are much more craft driven than home seamstress driven. Now, the exception to that is Joann fabric, in my opinion, and it might just be the store I have available to me. But even Joann fabric has expanded to home decor items, florals. They're trying to kind of be like hobby of all trades, master of none, but you can still buy fabric and traditional patterns, or at least I can, at Joann fabric. But for the most part, people today that are sewing are not doing so because they want to save a tremendous amount of money. And again, you can save a lot of money, especially like draperies, things like that, rather than to have them custom made. That's for sure. It's really more about the creativity. Maybe you have special garment needs or special fit needs, kind of a thing. So you want to be able to design and manufacture, if you will, your own clothing. I do think that specialty sewing machines like my Designer Epic 2 have helped with the resurgence of people learning to sew. And I've shared before, I think being able to sew is one of the skills that everyone needs to have. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. But it's nice for me to know that if I need new curtains, if I need a special outfit, I can come up here and I can create it. I can also create a lot of useful things like pot holders and placemats and table runners and things like that for the home. So would y'all like to see a little piece of my vintage pattern collection? All right, stay tuned for just a moment. So the first group I wanted to share with you are probably my personal favorites, albeit upside down. And that is my vintage holiday patterns. Now I have used, I'll show you the one that I've used. I have used one of the three of these, but I have them when I want to create sort of that mid-century modern or something custom, or even something to gift. Really, really cute. So this was, as you see, 50 cents. Sometimes you can kind of date a pattern by the price. And this one was 1959. And it was a little pricier than what some patterns were in 1959. But as you see, it's got the doorknob cover, the wool hanging. Let's see. Candle cover and nativity picture, tree skirt, bell tablecloth, and Santa table runner. Look at that Santa table runner, guys. I will make that one of these days. This is obviously my favorite, and it may look a little worse for the wear. This was from 1961, so the year I was born, and I think that's why I'm so attracted to it, because I do remember things like this. So I've actually made this tree skirt. I use it for my aluminum tree, and this has the multi-blue transfer stamps once on felt or about 6 times on light or some bright colored fabrics, does not stamp on black or dark colors. And it includes placemat, tablecloth, tree skirt, decorative tree, and mail holder. Mail holder? Well, how about that? Oh, okay, look at the little... That's really cute because I want something to put my cards in. All right, and we won't go in this depth with all of them, but I think these are kind of special. This one is from 1971, and it is super cute too. Has the candy cane card holder, tablecloth option, or tree skirt, and another tree skirt option. They look like frogs, but guys, they're not frogs. They're like little drummer boys, some ornaments and stockings on the back. So this one was 85 cents. So we've gone from 50 in 1961. It was also 50 cents, all the way up to 85 cents. So you can see prices increasing. So let's start now on butterick patterns. One of the things I did not share, y'all may be wondering, like, where did I get these? Kind of a combination. Thrift stores, Goodwill, from my aunt. That increased my collection significantly. The holiday ones did come off eBay years ago. I've had them for years, guys. Okay, so here is what a traditional butterick pattern looks like. And I'm going to say this is probably very early 70s or late 60s. It was 75 cents. It is not dated. This is the only true vintage butterick pattern I have. But, y'all, butterick now has a retro line of patterns. I want to make this dress, guys, and I even have the fabric for it. Let's see. This was 2014. And the U.S. price on this was, okay, wait for it, $19.95. Now, y'all, I did not pay $19.95 for this. A lot of times, Joann's will have a coupon. All patterns, 50% or 75% off. Here is one that's supposed to represent a dress from 1952. And let's see. Why don't I see a price on this? Well, I don't see a price on this one. And then this one is supposed to look like 1956. And this was also, $18.95. And the copyright date is 2011. So inflation has struck butterick patterns. It struck everything, right? I only have one advanced pattern. This was my aunt's. It's a Women's Day advanced pattern. It was 35 cents, so pretty sure that's 50s, guys. But how cute is that little top? Now, you might wonder, well, why are all your patterns such a big size? Well, partially because I'm not a small girl, right? But I realize I'm not, this wide. So vintage patterns, so what I could maybe wear 8'10" is about what size I think I am now. I was a 10, so you know, maybe some 8s I could wear in a vintage size pattern. I might be a size 18. And while that's humbling, and I have done a video on sizing changes, it is what it is. However, once you get out of the 50s into the 70-ish, a 14 would probably fit me just fine. One nice thing, it does have measurements and sizing on the back, but you will notice not all vintage patterns had multiple sizes in them. All right, let me roll back a little bit and let's grab some McCall's patterns. So this is so cute, y'all. How stinking cute is that dress? How stinking cute. So this is a size 18. It was 50 cents. And I suspect there is no, oh, copyright 1961. Very good year. So there's your McCall's dress pattern. This was my aunt's, and it's a Mrs. and Junior nightgown and duster. It was 65 cents. And it was copyright 1962. I strongly suspect that this was used as like a maternity nightgown by my aunt. Then this one is a Mrs. dress or jumper and blouse, 65 cents. Copyright 1963. Isn't that cute, guys? And this is a size 14. Might have to be altered, just saying. Y'all, I usually have to alter the top, but not the bottom. Enough said about that. This one I think is stunning. This is a size 14. It was 50 cents. And let's see. Wow, this one is not in as good of shape. Yeah. So this is one of my oldest. It is copyright 1948. And definitely, okay guys, just to give you ladies an idea, a size 14 was a 32 bust. That's probably enough said about that. Okay. Oh yeah, here's more 40s. This is a size 18. Copyright 1947, also from my aunt. Look at the style of that. Is that lovely? This is a size 18, 50 cents. And this looks like 40s as well. Oh, good Lord. I got the old lady eyes, 49. So even though my jam is a little more 50s, that is a lovely, lovely dress. So that is my collection of McCall's dress patterns. And let's finish them up here with what is truly my favorite to sew with is simplicity. And the majority of these were my aunt's. One of the goals I would like to do, while my aunt's still living, she is 88 years old, and we did have a lovely Christmas party together, is I would like to make one of her patterns and wear it to show her. So this is a Mrs. size 16, bust 36. Price was 50 cents. And I find a lot of times, y'all, if you're wanting to date simplicity, you're not going to probably find it. Oh. No. It just says copyright Simplicity Pattern Company. You might find it on the direction sheet. I'm going to guess this is probably 60s, judging by the style. But look at the back of this, like, coatish thing. So this is Mrs. Dress with detachable collar. Oh, I guess it's a dress. Okay, well, I would have called it a coat, but that's a coat dress. This one's really cute too. 65 cents, size 16. Still no copyright date. Mrs. Jacket, blouse, pants, and 2 skirts. It is your full weekend wardrobe. So I'm also going to say that's early, probably early 70s. What did I say price-wise? I don't, okay, hold on. Okay, I don't see a price, so I'm not sure on that. This one was definitely that 70s chic. This is a 65 cents simplicity pattern, size 16, bust 36. Oh, nope, still no copyright. Look at these chic pencil dresses. So I would say definitely just the style. I'd say 70s on this as well. This is a junior size dress. I highly doubt that will fit me. My aunt may have been sewing for someone else. Size 13, bust 33. Price is 65 cents. Guys, I just really think this looks 60s, but I'd say late 60s just by the fullness of the skirts. Now this one's really neat. This is a simplicity size 14, bust 34. Bonus basic how to sew patterns in Mrs. Proportion sizes with a bonus chart of how to make a better fitting dress and a tissue chart on how to join skirt and bodice. So this is also a little bit more fitted. 65 cents. I'm gonna say also probably 70s. This one's super fun. It definitely old. This is a simplicity size 16, bust 34. So you can kind of tell by sizing too is why I keep saying the size. 35 cents, 1950s all the way, guys. And let me tell you something. These dresses take so much fabric. So let's just say for a size 16, not sure if that would fit me. This would take 4 1/4 yards of fabric. That is a lot of fabric. That is not a pencil dress amount. This is one that I actually purchased, and I know I did this on eBay, and I actually made it, and I'll have to go model it for you. This was 85 cents. It might have been a size 20 with a bust of 42, and it's Mrs. Robe in 2 lengths, and it turned out amazing. This is an older pattern as well, size 16, bust 34, 35 cents. Maternity, thank you, Susie. Maternity blouse, jacket, and skirt. So I probably don't need that, but yeah, in case I ever decide to have a baby. Okay, we'll just go on past that. So this is, I think I got this in a box lot. It is definitely, I would say 40s, maybe 50s, house dress. This one is very old. It is 25 cents. It's a size 16, and I'm pretty sure that's 40s. One of my older patterns, and it's not in great shape. Again, might have gotten it like in a box lot at a Goodwill vintage store or something like that. And then the last one is a Mrs. size 16, bust 36. Price was 50 cents. So, what do you guys think? Late 50s, early 60s? Probably so. So let me do a quick model of something I have actually made from a vintage pattern, and then I'm gonna sign off for today with a very different kind of video. All right, guys, stay tuned. Now, y'all, I have to be honest, I can't remember if I did a video on this when I was making it or not. I don't think I did. So here you go. So it has the kimono sleeves. And sorry, guys, I have on 2 shirts as it is. The little stand-up collar. It is a pre-quilted fabric. Everything's well finished on it. And let me kind of do this around. I did add pockets with seam binding, and then it has a large belt. Oh goodness, could I be wearing any more clothes? That I made with, and it does go completely to the floor. So I was very pleased with how this mod style robe came out. So why did I make the, you might be like, why'd you need that? First of all, it's very practical and it's extremely warm. So from that standpoint, y'all, I have used and used and used this, so I'm very pleased. when I was growing up, I wanted one of these quilted robes. And my mom wouldn't buy me one. So, at age 60-something, I made it myself, right? So I have a question for you. First of all, if you've made it this far, I always forget to say this. I just want to welcome everyone. Y'all, we are over 6,300 now, new and returning subscribers. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. I love your comments. I love reading your comments. Don't ever feel shy about if you have a question. My email is always down in the description box. Email me privately. Many of you and I email back and forth. Many of us email back and forth, and I enjoy doing that as well. So if you've made it this far, please go ahead and smash that like button. But I need you to drop me a comment below. What style vintage dress, which vintage pattern, and I know I showed you a ton, guys, just give me an idea. Like make a pencil dress. It's not the sewing that's hard, it's the fitting that's hard. Or make a 50s style dress, or let me see you do something, you know, more in the 70s range. So maybe that's the question I really have is, should I do 50s, 60s, or 70s? If there was a specific pattern that stuck out to you, man, I would love to know which one, because now that we are in the throes of snowy, cold, and icy January, I would love to actually complete a dress. Probably a dress. As you know, most of those patterns were dresses. So I plan to see you all on Saturday, Lord willing, and the snow don't rise. And I just thank you again for spending time with me today. I always feel like you're right here with me, and I think about your requests. I've had a lot of stuff come up recently, and I haven't forgotten y'all. Sorry, y'all. I feel like I got something on my tooth. Had a question about how do I get my hair up in the bun, so I need to do that. Also some questions about freeze drying, so stay tuned for that. That will be coming up. I'll weave it into some upcoming videos. So I'll see you on Saturday, Lord willing. Be safe, stay warm, and until I see you again, be healthy, be well, be blessed, and take care.